So something that I just remembered as I was coming from the last site I was scouting, thinking that we didn't start till 6, was that we have, if I'm lucky and it hasn't been mowed, a hazelnut here. How many people know what the wild hazelnut looks like? Let's see if we can find it, because there's a good chance it's growing on most people's property if you have a lot of land. The hardest part about this guy is that you oftentimes have to fight the squirrels for it. But the easy way I find to recognize it is this little piece right there. You always see that on it, okay? This is hazelnut. Okay, you can pass it around, right at the base. And this one here, you really want to check it often and harvest it before the squirrels get it. So you just want to check, as soon as you find that a nut is ready, don't wait for it to ripen more, let it ripen off, and just get it before the squirrels get it.
Normally grow in wet or damp?
No, they grow in any edge. They're an edge plant. Roadsides, the power cuts are where we have a lot where I live, and they want to round up all the power cuts, but if we put tape on it and talk to them a lot, we can usually keep them from doing it. And we do have to mow everything else down, which I hate, but in order to keep them from using Roundup, that's better.
Is it a shrub or a tree?
It's a shrub. It's a shrub.
How big does the nut get? No, the nut.
Oh, the nut?
About like a regular size hazelnut.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not tiny. Look at the base where the branch comes off. You'll see that little lighter green thing sliding over it. That's how I recognize it. This is elderberry. Does everybody know elderberry?
Yes.
Okay. It's an amazingly wonderful plant. The berries are edible. My favorite use for them is wine. Elderberry wine to me rivals good port. I like it more than port because the medicinal impact is wonderful. We have a few that I know of, like readily available antiviral drugs, and there's usually bad side effects. The world is full of plants that are antiviral. We'll see several today. Elderberries, every bit of it is antiviral, and indeed, you're cautioned that the leaves and stems are poisonous. To quote Stephen Harrod Booner, who's one of my favorite authors on plants, they're poisonous in that if you eat too much, they'll make you nauseous. They're not going to kill you, they'll make you nauseous. He wrote a kind of like disdainful, laughing account of people being helicoptering some great distance, some campers that had eaten elderberry. And it was so that they wouldn't throw up in the wilderness instead of a hospital.
Would that be, did you say the stems? And
the stems, no, those are only medicinal, and you'd go real light on those because they will make you throw up. The one part that you wouldn't want to mess with, according to Stephen Harrod Booner, on your own would be the root, which is also antiviral, but very, very powerful. Could probably make you quite sick. That might get you in a hospital, But otherwise, I've made and have a lot of elderflower tincture. I don't have the berry tincture that I've collected for my own because the birds have beat me to them every time. My solution is going to be to grow so many that the birds let me have some. But that alone, the elderflower tincture, combined with echinacea, anytime I feel a cold or even flu coming on, every hour a dropper full. Just fill up a drop, the standard size droppers for all the herbal tinctures you get. Fill it up under the tongue, mix it with saliva, it's going to burn. Those two every hour, I've stopped lots and lots of cold. The only time it hasn't worked was if it was too far gone before I realized what was happening. Otherwise, I've always been able to reduce the effect. So I highly recommend it as a medicinal, and it's easy as all heck to make your own tincture. I won't try and tell you now, but I can tell you afterwards. Yes?
the berries you can just eat raw?
They're not very fun raw. Usually you cook them. They're kind of bitter. But they make a nice sauce, they make a nice jelly, they make, for me, my favorite, a wine.
And a wonderful syrup.
Syrup, yes, right, yep, indeed. Yeah, so it's a great plant, and by the way, incredibly easy to propagate. You find one you like, you simply break off a piece of stem any time of year of the woody stalk, stick it in the ground, it'll probably root. If you want to be certain it roots, put it under a table in the shade for a little while, it'll definitely root. These are all made from cuttings. I also learned at the Mother Earth News Fair that if you want nice big umbels that make lots of big clusters of berries, you mow them to the ground every year, and then you get single big umbels rather than lots of little ones. And then the last thing that I also learned at Mother Earth News, when I was asking the person if his stock was virus-free, he said, you want them infected with viruses because that's how they're most medicinal, because they're fighting the virus. So virus-free is nothing you're looking for, which is fun because we always have to worry about virus-free berries and virus-free this. But here, the viruses are part of what you're getting. Also, by the way, the flowers make nice fritters. You can put them in light batter and fry them up, and they make a nice fritter. And people also make cordials, just like the flowers just soaked in water, you know. But you need an abundance, but you can find an abundance. There are places where there are loads and loads of elderberries, and this is early to be flowering because they're in a pot, but you'll see them flowering, and you'll see just like lots in a given place.
Is there a better time of year to pick them?
Well, you only pick the flowers when they're in bloom,
Right.
you know,
And
and
how
the
about
berries.
leaves?
The leaves, you could probably harvest them anytime, but once again, you want to go very easy with those and learn what your tolerances are. I see them as a adjunct. You know, I make an elderflower tincture, and now I'll probably make a pretty strong tincture with these, but use way less. Just put a little
When you
bit.
say these, you mean
The
leaves,
stems and leaves.
stems and
Yeah,
leaves?
both of which are quote quote poisonous.
Okay.
You know, they will. You use them too much, you will be nauseous. You know, so you use them. You know, you learn what your tolerance is, and I'd probably only use those if I was really worried about a virus, because there's more. Each one's going to have a slightly different function, so it just gives you a broader range of impact.
What color are the berries?
Berries are dark blue, sometimes black, almost blue-black, but there are some that are just red. So there's some different varieties. Okay.
They self-propagating? Would you have?
Well, sure, they'll propagate them. Birds drop seeds. I mean,
I mean, do you need a male and a female for them to?
oh no, they're not. Yeah, you don't need a male and female. No, they are not. Oh, great. We'll see this later on, but this is a pot of wild food, all weeds, right? You have what a lot of you probably knew as kids, sour grass or sorrel, oxalis, right? Really nice lemony flavor. Probably don't want to overdo it because it's a lot of, can everybody see them? A lot of oxalic acid, which blocks calcium absorption. But amongst it, speaking of calcium absorption, one of the higher wild foods in the world of calcium, Lambsquarters, which is one of my all-time favorite wild foods. I eat the heck out of Lambsquarters.
What do you do with it?
I use it like cooked spinach. I prefer it to cooked spinach all the time.
Raw.
It's in the same family. Family is known as Chenopodium, which means goosefoot. And if you look at the leaf, you know why they called it Chenopodium.
Yep.
You know? I
So
could
you
pass.
want to get those before they're stemmy, right?
No, you can get them this tall. You can eat the greens, sure. Yeah,
Just,
just pick the greens off. Yeah, this here you probably could cook the whole thing. You know, lots of plants that I don't want to have to tediously take all the stems off of. I chiffonade. Does everybody know what I mean by chiffonade? I kind of make them up in a bundle, take a knife and slice them up to very thin strips. That really fibrous stem, you don't notice at all when it's chopped up tiny, and you're getting fiber out of it and nutrition. You know, time not to do that is the dead of winter, because when the light is really low, from like the 10th of December till about the middle of February, the stems hold even more nitrogen than the leaves. And so you want to try and harvest any greens you're getting in the winter. There are some wild greens you can pick in the winter, things like chickweed, right? You want to harvest them at the end of a sunny day. That's going to have the least concentration of nitrates, and you don't want to go eating the stems because they're going to have more nitrates.
What gives them the purple shade to get once in a while when they get a little bit bigger?
The purple shade, there are purple ones.
The magenta
Yeah,
spring.
they call it magenta spree, and I always called it pink lambsquarter.
Lambsquarters is actually more nutritious than spinach.
Yeah, well, it has more calcium, yeah, protein, yeah. All of them have oxalic acid. The jury's still out on that. Like, to me, I haven't heard any definitive opinion from nutritionists. I just figure if you eat all the greens we look at today, and then the greens you can grow in a garden and stuff, you're probably not going to have to worry about calcium. You know, it's about a diversity of diet, and people have not had problems eating this stuff from long before they knew about oxalic acid. You know, that's mulberry.
Mulberry?
Yep. Yep. Tomorrow we're gonna start planting a bunch of berms we made, and that's alder, which is the animal fodder, and it's high in nitrogen. It makes nitrogen without being a legume, and very high in protein for animals. Okay, let's head in. First off, I'm going to show you what I mean by under a table. Just like that. I think whoever had that question? Yeah. So I just stick it on the table because there's filtered light, because these don't have any roots, right? They're cuttings. And so this is a wonderful herb called Jalgalan, which is an herb that produces the same qualities as ginseng, but way, way easier to grow, and nobody steals it. Yeah. You can't get $300 a pound for it either, but it's a lot easier to grow. So we're going to be growing this. We're hoping to use it on a living roof. And so I just took the vines. I'd heard that they're easy to root, and they sure seem like they're rooting, and just put them underneath the table, ready to go. So that's chickweed in flower, which you can still eat, but you'd want to chop it up really fine because the stems are going to be a little bit intense. And of course, in the wintertime, you would not eat all those stems because they might be higher in nitrogen. But chickweed's very easy to collect. Without the stems, the leaves are more looking like down there. You know, I'll pass it around. And it's a really, really common green. I had to make a deal with my partner that I only let one bed be taken over because she would have the whole garden taken over by it. And it will totally outcompete everything else. Ironically, I was once in a store where they were selling chickweed killer. And I was like, I guess I'd just eat it. It's not that hard to kill anyways, but if you let it go to seed, you'll have tons of it in any given bed. So just be aware of that. Like, we'll always have it underneath the tables here because we let it go to seed, which is not a problem. And it's available for us to harvest. Okay, everybody knows dandelion, right? Anybody not know dandelion? Okay, well, mostly people are harvesting dandelion very early in the season, but I've found that any time that they're not in flower, I can take these leaves, quickly parboil, saute them, and use them as if I was cooking one of the chicory family vegetables. So it's going to have a little bitterness, but that's part of the flavor component. And a lot of Americans just think of bitter as bad, but the rest of the world uses that taste bud too as part of their cuisine.
So especially for the liver.
They're very good for the liver. A lot of the things we're going to look at, early spring greens, are really good for the liver, and they fit into that fact that this is a great time of year to cleanse. Historically, humans had the least rich and the least amount of food in the late winter, early spring. Hence, Lent was kind of a natural, you know, because
drink the water after. The water after you boil
drink
it.
the water from it. Yeah,
Yes,
load it
you
with
keep it
minerals.
in the fridge and drink it.
Yeah, load it with minerals. You know, the flowers are also edible. My partner actually made dandelion wine once. It was quite delightful. Did take a lot of sugar, you know,
Yeah.
but maybe you can mix it with another high sugar fruit, and not have to use the sugar. You know. So the flowers are, of course, also edible. A lot of the plants we're going to look at also have edible flowers, and it's good to eat those too. You eat them at different times of the year. I think that might be, was there anything else in here? Let me take a quick look on this side. Our native one looks a little different, but does everybody know grapes? Grape leaves are abundant this time of year, quite tender and wonderful for making your own domas. And you could actually just eat them too. So you want the young. I always go for the lighter green. This is not one I would try and harvest from because they're all pretty small in a pot, you know. But the lighter green is going to be more tender. Readily available, easy to eat. Something else, not really a wild food, but a largely unknown food that should be abundantly available for most gardens and farms. Sweet potato leaves, totally edible, totally delicious, tender. For some reason, I really love them fried up, chopped up and crisply fried. Not crisp really, but just a good fast fry with a reasonable amount of butter or olive oil, you know. Not to stint too much, you know. If you're eating all these greens and stuff, you got less of that to worry about. If you're collecting your own, you even have less to worry about because you're getting that outdoor exercise. And if you're in the mindset of doing that, you're probably not having to worry about, you know, it's a sedentary lifestyle. I think that really influences that. Another one that we have in here that largely is unknown as a food, and they're desperate to go out, but the borage. Yes, borage is in the comfrey family, a bioaccumulator. The flowers are famously edible and have a faint cucumber flavor, which is so faint that most people don't get it until you tell them, and then they go, oh yeah, I taste that. But the leaves are commonly used as a piece of Italian dishes that have greens in them. You don't use tons, but you use a small amount, and they're very good. I know the FDA thinks that comfrey is carcinogenic, and I think they think that the whole family is carcinogenic, and they're, of course, feeding bales of them to rats. You know, it's like they've been eating them in Italy forever and not dying, you know. I regularly, there's a favorite dish of ours, torta pasqualini, which you can find in lots of Italian cookbooks, which is either spinach or beet greens cooked with borage, porcini mushrooms, I use shiitakes, lots of marjoram, lots of garlic, and then custard made with ricotta and eggs. And then in each section, you poach an egg in a little cavity and slice through it, and it's a pascalini is Easter, you know. And the borage is kind of the thing that really gives you the authentic taste. You know, it's fine without it. If you don't, we had to make it this year without it because none of our borage made it through the winter, but lots of years we have it, and that's what we make for Easter. Okay, any questions so far? Yeah.
The dandelion, can you eat it when it is harvested or when it is flowering?
Oh, you can eat it, it's just going to be bitter.
Ah, okay.
Oh, and I neglected to mention the root, of course. You could literally grate the root up and eat it if you were really hungry, but it's more widely used as something that's roasted and used for a coffee drink. You know, and indeed there's a very pricey coffee drink at the food co-op called Dandelion or something like that. You know. Dandy blend. Yeah, it's very good. It sure is costly though. But if you harvest enough to make your own, you'll know why.
Dandelion lookalike here, which I was wondering if it was edible.
I think it's wild lettuce. Is that what you're thinking of?
I'm not sure, but it gets really big and it's really got irregular leaves.
It gets really, really tall when it's in flower. Yeah, that's wild lettuce. We are infested with it. And I finally got it. Lisa was talking about all of its uses on the radio show one day. I finally got it. I need to make tinctures from that. It is here for a reason, and I need to honor that reason because I spent lots of time pulling them up and getting them so they don't spread their flowers. And I had to ask Karina, our sweet teammate, the daughter of Rocco and Kendra, to not blow those flowers through this greenhouse because they end up in the pots and then we have it coming up there. It's amazingly good at moving itself around, and at least I know it has sedative kind of impacts. Lisa, do you have some of the, do you remember?
Painkiller as strong as morphine. When you break the leaf off, that lactarius, that milky substance is the active painkiller ingredient is in there. So if you collected that, broke off each stem and then broke the main stem and then kind of milked the plant, you could collect that and have a little tincture of that. You might want to put something, a little vitamin E to preserve it or something, but that's supposed to be a very potent painkiller, as potent as morphine.
It is so easy to come by.
As far as you know, is there a limit on how long you can use it as a painkiller, by chance?
I don't know about homeopathic doses. You might want to look up that.
If you're making it homeopathically, there's probably no limit at all. But if you were doing it straight, there might be a limit. You know.
Can you do that lettuce raw or cooked?
You know, I have never tried it. I've heard it's very, very bitter. It's edible for sure, but it's very, very bitter. So once again, if we were the Cambodians under the thumb of the Khmer Rouge, we'd probably be figuring out how many times to boil that off and cook it. You know, but we're not in that place now, anyways. You know, but you would definitely do a couple of waters. There's a lot of things that are just strong enough. Poke, for example. I'm sure we'll see some poke. We have to get up to my house to see it, but there's a lot of things that are just, you know, strong enough that you want to throw the waters off. So I can tell you that when I first got here back in '84, I was committed to not buying vegetables, and we ate an outlandish amount of poke to the point where I don't like it anymore. And we did not throw the water off, and we picked it bigger than they say, and we're still alive. You know, I got one unusual malady, but my partner doesn't, so I don't think it was because of the poke. You know. Yeah. Okay, let's head back out again. Did anybody that didn't get to see chickweed? Can somebody stand by there and just point it out to them as we go around? Okay, we do usually, though today it didn't happen, but usually we do an internet radio show every Tuesday. I come on here about 1:40. Yeah.
They're all on the website. If you go to multimedia drop-down radio, you can hear hundreds of shows with Pat, and he does This Week in the Garden.
They're as easy to propagate as the elderberry.
I have about 5 in my farm, but keep dying every year. You know.
Well, they die to the ground, right? So what you want to do is put some kind of a cage around them and wrap them, you know? It's not that hard to do, really.
In Greece, I have a lot of those, you know, they never die.
Right, yeah, no, it's a very different climate.
Yes, indeed.
But you can make them live here. If you want to talk to me about it, I can give you a bunch of different plans. So, dock is edible. Once again, a bitter green, spring green. The youngest, smallest, littlest leaves are going to be the tastiest, least bitter, most palatable. But you could, once again, if you were hungry, chop them up fine and cook them enough, and you could eat the whole thing. You know, it's also medicinal. This here is the curly dock. Largely, I say because of the curly edges on the leaves, but it turns out that they hybridize, and you can tell which ones are medicinal by the flowers, which seeds have wings, and they're actually early enough now that we might be able to show an example of that. I'm not really seeing wings on this one.
Is that a yellow dock?
Yeah, that's yellow dock or curly dock. There's also common dock, and they totally cross. That's more the common dock there. See, it doesn't have this curly kind of edge than the leaf, you know. But as far as the medicinal value, who knows? You have to look at the wings on the seeds to tell, because they totally cross. But as far as food goes, any of the younger leaves are going to be edible and quite the bitter tonic, you know. But very good. And they'll also have, if you want to come through and just get a little bit to taste, after the bitterness, there's a little bit of sour. So it's real food. You can definitely be fed by it, you know. We're going to see lots of these everywhere, but does everybody know violets? Yes. Violets are completely edible, very good for you. You can do young leaves and tender leaves in salads. You can cook them. You know, flowers are, of course, edible. Readily available. Buttercup is poisonous. Nice and poisonous. And you'll know the minute you taste it, you'll spit it out. Burns like crazy. It's quite kind to tell you not to eat it. Turkeys eat it, which is pretty interesting. Not much of anything else will eat it. Monarda is a great tea plant, and I don't remember if the leaves have the same taste. Yeah. AKA bee balm is another name for it. Anybody that wants to, you will taste this, and it'll taste like the hottest Greek oregano you ever had. And you can eat the leaves too. It is fiery, full of flavor. You can season lentils. I'm sure, just like oregano is good for fighting illnesses, I bet you that this is quite medicinal too. No guarantee, but I would bet, I'd give odds, you know. I'd gladly give odds.
The light lavender one. This isn't wild oregano though, is it?
No, it's not wild oregano.
It just tastes like it.
Yeah.
The light lavender one, Pat, that grows in the forest is supposed to be highly medicinal. Michael Phillips was raving about it.
Okay, so Lisa just said the white version, there's several different colors.
Light lavender.
Light lavender, rather, is highly medicinal. But I bet they're all reasonably medicinal, you know.
Yeah.
So everybody knows buttercup, right? What we just asked about? That's the poisonous one. Stay away from it. Here's a great place to look at. Pardon? White clover, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can make tea from the flowers.
Lettuce, the wild lettuce.
Wild lettuce, yeah.
No.
Where were you seeing the wild lettuce?
Oh, maybe not. What's this?
That is, I'm just about ready to talk about, that is longleaf plantain. So does everybody know why I love plantain? You can eat, by the way, the youngest, tenderest leaves, quite edible. And an interesting flavor. If you want to find a young one and take a pick, it's got a very interesting flavor. They're going to be a little tough, but they have a nice, interesting flavor. Take a little bite off and pass it around. There's more to see. But what's so important to me, and by the way, you can also buy a cultivar called Minuta, and it's got very crispy, narrow leaves, but it's a plantain. You know, so it's a salad green you can buy. But what's especially important to me about it is if you get stung by anything, or indeed if I got bit by a snake, on the way to the hospital, which I would do, right, I would be making a poultice with the plantain. What I do when I get stung is I start chewing it up and putting it on, and I keep chewing it up and putting it on and renewing it. And I do it until white-faced hornet sting right below the ankle, which is a pretty tender place, right? 20 minutes later, small red dot. No burning, no itching, no pain, you know? It is magic. And when we have kids events, I almost wish that someone would get stung so we can quickly fix it. And they'll stop being afraid of the buzzing bugs, because it really kind of hinders kids, you know?
Patrick, I'm thinking about the oregano flavor of that. Could we dehydrate it and just, you know, put it into a jar and use it in our kitchen, the bee balm?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
How about any of these things? Same
You
thing.
can dehydrate any edible green, sure, yeah.
Use it as a tea or, or a seasoning, right?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Do you make tinctures from the raw plant or do you dry it first?
I make it from the raw plant, yeah. And we could talk about tinctures, but I think probably not on the thing. Other people have given better talks about that already for us, so.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah. What I'm really wishing I could see, and I haven't seen it, but if anybody sees it instead of me, anybody that knows bed straw, also known as cleavers, that's a wonderful food. And the fruits, by the way, the cleavers are bed straw, is the same family as coffee. And I've yet to do it. It would only be an exercise in just to know how to do it, because the fruits are very small, but you can apparently roast the fruits and make a coffee-like substitute.
Which is it?
The bed straw, also known as,
Can you point to it?
I don't have it here, that's what I'm saying. Anybody who does know it, right? Also known as cleavers. It's that one that makes big rapidly spreading vines that kind of stick to you. That's why it's called cleavers, you know? It's real common, and I've seen it other places, but it's not here yet this year.
And what about the purple?
Yeah, all the clover flowers, totally edible.
And it's real low to the ground?
Low to the ground unless it gets up on something. It'll climb, you know. But it doesn't climb like a pea or a cucumber. It kind of climbs that kind of like ramping kind of up, you know. A big vine shoots out, leans over kind of thing. Yeah. All right, this one here is very edible. Milkweed, of course, it's great to grow it also for the monarchs. The one that I'm familiar with is using the flower heads and cooking them like broccoli. You know, you want to pour water off from it.
What is it?
It's milkweed. You know, yeah. Yeah, right here, here. And how can you tell it's milkweed? If you have any doubt, once you learn the look of it, you get the milk, you know. Yeah.
And what do you do with it?
I tend not to cook it anymore because I want them all for the monarchs. But the one that is most appealing that I've really enjoyed is the flower buds. So you're cooking it like broccoli, you know.
What season do you find the buds?
The buds, it depends. It's like these are early, and they come up over, you know, I have a patch that I'm raising for the monarchs, and my first one showed up the other day. I have hundreds, but they'll show up over time, and the last ones will show up sometime in July, and then I'll mow a patch so that, you know, it's real young, so that I have some flowering even later, so the monarchs always have food. And so you would be getting the buds over a long period of time, but mostly it'd be no earlier than midsummer and into fall, late summer and fall, you know, because that's when the plant is. By the way, another thing, and I should also point out goldenrod. How many people here are gardeners? Okay. As you might know, I teach a lot about beneficial insects, and a way to get inspired by that is to pay attention to goldenrod, milkweed, and burdock. All of these usually, well, for the burdock and the milkweed, it's when they're in flower, you know, later in the season. But the goldenrod, it's like sometime towards the end of this month, early June, covered up with aphids, totally covered. And the milkweed also has something called the milkweed seed bug. And they're very, very abundant soft-bodied insects, and every predator in the world is going to land there and be preying on them and laying their young in them. So you can really learn your beneficial insects by looking at goldenrod. It's just, you'll see these clusters of red aphids, very noticeable. I've seen one goldenrod aphid on a chrysanthemum in the greenhouse once. Otherwise, it doesn't attack anything else we know. And the goldenrod's doing fine, so it's nothing but a benefit for us. Burdock, it's not as common, but occasionally the flower stalks get covered up with a black aphid, and that may attack other things, I don't know. But boy, is it covered up with beneficials. And then the milkweed, it's got both the yellow goldenrod, the milkweed aphid and the milkweed seed bug. The adult looks a lot like a box elder beetle, bug rather. But it's the young red nymphs that are the delicacies for the beneficials. So it's just great to learn to look at those things, and the more you look, the more you see. I get better and better collections of pictures of predators. I just last year got a tachnid fly. I have an entomologist friend that it looks like a housefly. But I know if it's on a milkweed next to these things, it's probably not a housefly. So everybody recognize this guy here? Right, elderberry. Everybody knows multiflora rose, right? You don't want to eat the leaves. I don't think they'd be poisonous, but you don't want to eat the leaves of multiflora. But the flowers are quite edible. And then the hips later on will make fine tea or wine. You know, you want to collect them before hard freeze because they'll be damaged with a hard freeze.
Full of vitamin C.
And so, yeah, and it's a great thing for you to harvest them because we don't need any more of it growing. When the wind's not blowing, it has one of the most wonderful aromas, wonderful fragrances. Right here, and I have to confess, I haven't yet eaten this. I think of it as an herb for brewing, which then makes me not interested in eating it. But they do eat this. Everybody says not too much. This is ground ivy. It was used by the Celts for brewing as a replacement for hops. And as Stephen Harrod Booner says, this and swamp rosemary or bog rosemary, whatever the word that is, were used. And it's kind of ironic that the wicked weed makes the hop to be the heavily abused herb, because actually it was the suppression of this and bog rosemary, actually the first drug war, that caused people to be railing against the hops. They were forcing the hops on us at the behest of the monks, who didn't like the fact that this, when beer made with this is imbibed, it increases your libido and tends you towards exhilaration and exuberance. And that was not the favorite behavior of the monks, so they wanted you to take hops, which kind of can do that, but can as easily make you like, oh, you know. So, but you can also eat this, the youngest, tenderest shoots and leaves. Yeah. But what I've read, nobody thinks you should eat lots of it at once. It's pretty strong, and for me, having read that, I'm more interested in it as a brewing herb. But if you were hungry, you know, you need it. It's abundant. It's everywhere. You know, easily come by. Okay.
And it's mixed with chickweed right there. You can see.
Yep, chickweed, dock. I mean, this is another one of those. I mean, if you look at weeds, plantain.
Does it flower, the ground ivy?
Yeah, it's got a bluish flower. Yeah, or purplish. Yeah. So this here is our burdock patch. Ah, great. Amongst it is also henbit. I sometimes mix it up with dead nettle. They're both lamiums. They're all edible. You chop them up. I mix them with other greens. They're not my most favorite exciting green on its own, but it's a mint family. You know, so you can see it's got a square stem. Edible, wonderful bee forage. Also, the flowers are of course edible too. Okay, so burdock. What's great about the burdock is that it's easily harvested. You harvest it before it starts to go to flower. You dig it. The root is used in Japanese cooking. Quite tasty. We try and put it in any stir fry we do. It's got lots of medicinal effects, particularly good for gout, but as a blood purifier in general. You can strip the stems and cook the stems like artichokes or something. Usually you fry them. I never have bothered to do that. It's a lot of work. The leaves crushed are supposed to be good for bruises. And it's the one that those flowering stalks can get all the aphids I talked about. It also is the one that has the big burrs that get on everything, you know. Yeah, Velcro. Interestingly, this is not a wild population. It is now a farrow cultivar. So we bought a cultivar, grew it 1 year, and never have had to plant it again. And if we go up to the other end up there, if anybody was at the garden classes last year, there were leaves like this, you know, and there'll be huge roots down below, you know. We don't dig nearly as much as we have, but I dig it whenever I remember to. I also have it in silo, so I can dig it either place, you know.
Again, good for liver too.
Yeah, very good for you in general. Yeah, quite abundant. Okay, now I planted this, but it occurs wild all over the place. Stinging nettle. Everybody know stinging nettle? Stinging nettle makes the most wonderful green stock or tea you have ever seen. It is the richest green you can imagine. Very high in protein, quite delicious. You must cook it enough or it'll be lousy. It'll have this kind of nasty grittiness in your mouth. But I like to make soups out of it therefore. But stinging nettle soup is one of our classic spring things to have. If you've had overwintered leeks, you know, potato, stinging nettle, leek soup, really wonderful. Long sleeves and gloves, the minute you cook it, it's no longer stinging, you know. And people do know how to pick them in a way that they can eat them, roll them up on themselves, and eat them without doing that, but I'm not into that. Another interesting use, I don't know if people know about apitherapy, using bee stings to relieve all kinds of joint pain and stuff because it causes a natural release of cortisone. For the squeamish, for those that can't stand to be stung or the highly allergic, you can take stinging nettles and work the area with the stinging nettles. It'll give you a similar though less powerful effect. You know, it's the same thing that's in the bee sting, formic acid. So
we're having a workshop about that in September.
Yeah, and I'll leave the rest of that to that. You know, I don't need to cover that more.
How long do you have to cook the nettles?
You know, I don't have a really time it, but it's going to be at least 15, 20 minutes, I think. You know, yeah. I just make a soup, so I'm not worried about it because I'm simmering it. You know, everybody know creasy greens? Okay. All right. So the thing about that is, if they're too bitter for you, you look for the lighter green ones. They're less bitter. The darker green's probably better for you because bitter is good for you, but you know, they're a field item. You know, they're a rosette. You know, I'm thinking this probably is creasy greens. If she's able to pull it all up, we'll take a look at it. You know, but it's broken off like this. I can't really tell. All right. So a plant that's going to come on in a big way soon is amaranth. People know amaranth, also known as pigweed or red root.
That's amaranth?
That's amaranth, yeah. Also known in the Mediterranean as callaloo. Very popular green in the Mediterranean because it takes the heat, it loves the heat. You can eat the stems. They're going to be tough if you don't get the young ones. The flowers, the leaves, and the seeds. The seeds are high in saponin, so wash them very well, you know. But what's really abundant is the leaves, and they make tons, and almost everybody's going to have them in their garden. Very common weed, and they'll give you that nice bright purple and something different flavor-wise in your salad mix. And it's something, usually, you know, you can put lots of these wild greens in your salad mix, but it'll take you a good while to collect them all. But with the amaranth, it'll come up in big clusters because it makes hundreds of thousands of seeds. And they'll just drop all in one place, and you can just come through and mow tons down, still leave a few to eat, you know, and get loads of them. You know, very, very productive, abundant, grows through the heat of summer. We're going to head back now because I want to show you some things I have in pots, and then I'm going to run up to my house and grab one pot that has very young Galansoga. Do people know Galansoga? I guarantee you, you've all pulled it out of your garden if you're a gardener. And most people in America don't know you can eat it, but it's on the home page of the Colombian embassy. Because in Colombia, it's part of a national dish. I'm pretty sure it's dried Galansoga, not certain about that, a specific potato that takes more days than we have to grow it in here in our climate. Hard corn, not sweet corn, but grain kind of corn, chicken, and I think tomatoes. And it's a classic Colombian dish. Someday I'm going to get it made. This is a Cherokee Green, a woodland plant. I've learned from Zeb Friedman you can cut it back and eat it all summer till about middle of July. Okay? Cherokee, yeah, it's called Sochin. Yeah, and it's also a coneflower, a kind of yellow-green coneflower. Gets quite tall. And I learned from Zev, although I know of restaurants that don't do this, that you should actually parboil it, pour that water off, or save it for medicinal use, because it's like coneflower, like echinacea, and quite medicinal, but not eat it without taking some of that medicinal out. It's more than you need at one time, you know. So a quick parboil and then a saute, very distinctive flavor. Really nice. It's fun to have different tasting foods. And of course, I haven't gotten into it yet, but you know, when we were hunter-gatherers, the numbers of different plants that we ate was in the hundreds, if not thousands. And now it might be 60 or 70 or something. And all that diversity probably was one of the things that kept us from getting the various degenerative diseases, you know, that we now get. Because we're all those medicinals. Food is medicine. It's the original medicine. So this, of course, is medicinal. And maybe if you felt a cold coming on, you wouldn't parboil it. Maybe you just take all of it, you know. It certainly won't kill you to not parboil it, because I did it for 2 years before I learned this year not to, you know. I don't eat tons of it because I have such a wealth of greens I get to eat. And having to parboil is one more step, and I'm usually like, get in the house, get that stuff cooked and get it eaten because I'm starving, you know. But I try to get myself to eat it several times just to become more familiar with it. I'm really enamored of the flavor. I love the flavor. And if you walk around on the edges and rich edges and stuff, you'll find it. Our front yard is loaded with it. Okay, I purposely dug this patch because it's got both false Solomon seal and Solomon seal. Okay, and this was like part of what I really wanted, why I wanted Abby to teach this class, because I have limited knowledge about the woodland foods, and they're not as common. You have to go further for them, but if we were hungry enough, we could. And we'd also want to be careful about how much we harvest them, because we could easily wipe them out. You know? So you wouldn't take very much, you'd take a little bit. And indeed, I want to plant this. I'm not willing to dig down and see what the root's like, but you can also eat the root. This entire stalk is edible. The leaves are edible, kind of like asparagus. Really tender and nice raw, and also can be cooked. This, obviously not tender and nice, kind of wiry. Not the same color, no blue in that green, right? But it's kind of similar looking. This is false Solomon seal. Okay, so that's Solomon seal and false Solomon seal. You do not eat. Do not eat the false. Okay. Yeah, eat the Solomon seal. Go easy on it, please. You know, if you see tons of it, eat more, but you know, probably never more than like 10%. You know, they're not fast growing, and if a bunch of people go ahead and hit 10% even, they might really impact that population. So have a good ethic on that, but it's good to know it. You know, you may need that food at some time. And it's also a delight to have a little bit every year, you know. I don't eat tons, but I always eat a little bit every year. All right, so here amongst my tea plant, buckwheat, which by the way, the very young greens are quite tasty and taste a lot like buckwheat. It's really fun, you know. You can make sprouts out of them. And if we were starving, I'm sure we could cook these leaves up too. They'd be tough, but you could chop them up fine and cook them and they'd be fine. But what's really in here is Galansoga. Anybody recognize it now? Oh, yeah. That kind of hairy leaved item. It gets about that tall usually, or that tall, and it has a small, little, or diminutive white flower with a yellow center.
You're referring to this?
Yes.
Okay.
That's Galansoga. I guarantee you, when you see it in your garden, you'll know it. You can pull one out. I mean, it's not like I'm attached to these. These are, they are edible raw, but not as much fun. They're better cooked. I eat a lot of these now. Now that I know them, I get them before they go to seed. And they're just so easy to grab a big handful. And if I can grab a bunch of wild food and eat it instead of something I grew, I want to do that. I want all that's about that, unmessed with by people genetics, that natural, intense nutrition, All these guys are nutrient dense. Anybody that thinks they don't have it could take one home. I'm sure you could plant it and grow it. Do not complain to me if it takes over. But if you eat enough, anybody else want one? Want to look at one?
And you're going to saute it?
Yep, I'd saute it. I chop all these guys fine. That way I don't have to worry about the stems, Chop them all fine. By the way, oak leaves, everybody knows about acorns, right? Yeah. White oak in particular. White oak are really the protein acorn, the red oak, and this is all from Oscar. I forget his last name. Do you know Oscar's last name? Wild, yeah.
With an E on the end.
Pardon?
Peterson.
With an E on the end. I got this from him. I'm no expert on it, but I'll pass on what he taught me. The white acorns are for a meal, a high protein kind of meal, and the red oak acorns are better for the oil. Very good for your oil, very high in oil. And you want to learn to leach them and all that, but it's not that hard. And of course, I think last year was the year we had them, so it'll be the year after. They come about every 2 years, but very abundant. Okay, let's head to the North River Farm. This is nothing I would ever recommend you establishing your garden. Mugwort. Does anybody know mugwort? Artemisia family. It's oftentimes shows up in gardens. It's a total thug. Very hard to control. It's really pretty easy to ID by the aroma and the gray-white on the back. It's an artemisia. All of the artemisias are antiviral. This is not one of the stronger antivirals, but it's still antiviral. And it's used, commonly they dry it and make pillows to enhance streams, or smoke it to enhance streams.
Isn't it used for depression?
I hadn't heard that one. Used for depression, okay. And it's also used by the Japanese to flavor pasta. I haven't done that one yet, but someday I'm going to give it a try.
And the Chinese use it.
Moxibustion, for moxibustion, yes. So it has incredible number of uses, and yet to us it's like, how do we get rid of it without using poison? It's, pardon?
Would you be able to make a tea and an extract from it?
Yeah, sure, yeah. But you'd use it as medicinal, it's very strong, Why it's such a thug is it's the Medusa effect. If you break it off, every little bit grows, So good luck trying to pull it out. You have to basically suppress it by smothering.
But grab handfuls is nice as a sachet.
Yeah, take all you want, believe me. But don't take any root and don't plant it unless you want a plantation. Okay, and so here's another clover. I know we had somebody pointing out the clovers. This one is also edible. What I like to do with these kind of things is, if you try to eat one of these, it's going to be a hairy experience. But if you pull it apart into a salad, then it's quite nice. And you get a bunch of edible blossoms and put them in a salad, it has a very nice effect. It's a celebratory salad. It takes more labor. Really, the best thing to do is have all the blossoms there and invite your guests to help you do it.
What's the name of this one?
This is crimson clover. Yeah, it's an annual or a biennial. You plant it in the fall. It flowers in the spring. Comes back with cool weather. It self-seeds like crazy. Common cover crop.
So is this just open space, or is it actually a farm where they grow things?
Well, we're doing cover crops now.
See all the different cover crops in there?
We don't plow at all anymore. We just
No-till system.
Oh, okay. So what would you plant in there after?
We'll plant all kinds of things: corn, all kinds of vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, garlic.
Will you cut it then and let it be a mulch, and then will you seed drill?
Well, what we're going to try and do is roll it. We have a roller crimper. So when you roll it, it even takes longer to rot. So it makes it even better armor for the soil and slower.
You just drive over it.
Yeah, you wait till it's in seed, heavily in seed, and then you roll over it. And the roller's heavy and has a sharp crimping edge, so it actually kinks it and breaks it, and then it dies.
And then what happens next?
Then we just take a no-till planter and plant through it. If you're smart, you roll one way, or you roll one way and then the other way so that you can come back and forth with the planter. Yeah, you're going to come at it the same direction you rolled it in with the planter. Yeah, otherwise it'll be kind of messy.
When is that going to happen?
That's going to happen probably in about 2 weeks, depending on the weather. You really want it to be pretty darn in full bloom to get a kill. Really, we're trying to keep the vetch out because we find we have a really hard time killing the vetch. So we're pulling it from our mix, but the problem is that it comes back on its own, you know. So it's kind of put a kink in some of our plans. Okay, we're going to head back here. How many people know cat briar or Smilax? Pretty painful item to bump into in the woods, right? Really tasty, really medicinal. Another one of those ones that you'd spend a long time picking enough to sustain you. So this is Smilax, also known as cat briar, really intense little thorns, you know. And I've heard people say that why we don't get as much pressure from the deer in the springtime as we do in the late summer and fall is because they're busy eating this, okay? But for those that want to try it, you want to pick like maybe one more leaf down there would have been good. It's got a wonderful, to me, resinous, sweet kind of flavor. Some people can't stand it. So,
It's like asparagus.
yeah, it's kind of, yeah. And so there's a bunch of it here. People look and see. Don't collect the bittersweet instead because that is not edible. But you want those young, tender tips. And like on this one here, much more could be picked. This is like, this could be eaten all the way down to there, I could tell, you know. So just pass it around, take a piece off.
The whole thing, right?
Yeah, right. But take a little piece and take a taste.
What is it again? Cat?
Smilax or cat briar. And there's a Puerto Rican version that Guy Herbs ships in as a medicinal. So this is medicinal too, but not as powerful as the Caribbean version.
Do you eat it just raw?
That's my favorite thing to do is eat it raw. I love to have it in salads, you know, just mix. But the problem is my partner doesn't like it at all, so I have to keep it on the side and toss it in, you know. But I was real frustrated. I wasn't finding it, and then coming back out, I saw it and said, ah, great, cat briar. Because there can be lots of this. In a disturbed area, you can find lots and lots of this. And actually, I'm suspecting you could even eat down to there. Yeah, it's still good there, you know.
Wow, very shiny.
Yeah. Quite medicinal. I don't know, what does everybody think? How many people like it?
Are you feeling it?
Okay, anybody hate it?
It's lemony.
All right, great. Yeah. Lambsquarters. Lambsquarters, by the way, you're going to find it in rich places like barnyards and stuff like that. This is like growing on top of a compost pile. And that's why it's so abundant here, you know. But it's more this size that we normally would pick, you know. And indeed, I had an intern who went to Warren Wilson. She had a garden plot, and she was like, yeah, I sold my garden plot to quinoa, but it came up all Lambsquarters, so I had to weed it all out, and like, you just pulled out your quinoa. Because they look exactly the same. They're very close relatives, you know. Yeah. And you can eat the seeds. Once again, wash them well. The saponins are hard on your liver. So you want to wash those saponins off before you eat the seeds. But really good protein, good food, you know, similar to quinoa. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you here. So it's walking past that compost pile and then another probably 100 feet to see this tiny little oxeye daisy. I would recommend instead that you just look it up online, you know, because there's not much else to see besides that. So I think we should probably just do that. You can eat it raw or you can cook it, you know, it's quite tasty.
Just the leaves. Anything with the flowers?
Well, I haven't specifically checked it out, but most composite flowers are edible anyways. I don't know of any that aren't, though I don't want to promise that. There might be. And since the leaves are edible, I would be very surprised if you couldn't eat the flowers too, you know. Okay, so we're going to walk along this way and look at a few more things you might find more in the woods. So do people know about pine? You can eat the young buds and the pollen, and it's particularly good for guys. Very androgenic, very high in the compounds that increase testosterone. So a natural way, and indeed, Stephen Harrod Booner talks about the fact that there have been places they found that were pine forest where the fish were all altered, they were all male because of the impact of all the pollen, you know. So good to know.
Did you say pine?
Pine pollen, yeah.
Pine pollen.
Yes, right.
Off the pine tree.
Yeah, right. But you can also make teas or even eat those youngest tips, you know.
You can make teas off. I mean, is that it's loaded with vitamin C?
Yeah, it'd be loaded with vitamin C. Yeah. Also recommended to me by my acupuncturist to make vapor and breathe it when I had a cough that she said, you're looking at walking pneumonia if you don't take care of this. So we just like put boiling water and I put my head, a cover over it and I breathed it. And it made a significant difference, So I wanted to show you the wild grape. If you'll all keep your eyes out and see it before me, it'll save my having to walk us further down to find it. But the other thing we're looking for here is sassafras. How many people know sassafras? Yep, we'll find it. And also gumbo, the young leaves, dried leaves are for filet gumbo. So here's sassafras. Once again, USDA says carcinogenic, but they've been using filet for gumbo forever, So the young leaves dried is what you'd make filet gumbo with. But it's also fun just to make a tea from the stem, from the young growth. You can take a piece and chew on it, you'll see. And you'll also get why it would be like okra, and it's got that kind of slimy thickening. As you chew on it, you'll get that, which is very good for our insides, by the way, to get some of that, Once again, it's like how much you use, whether or not it's, how much are you liable to use of something like this? Probably not tons. If you overdid it, maybe it would give you cancer. But I would bet that all the stuff coming from the supermarket is more likely to give you, And maybe Fukushima will have something to do with that too, Does somebody have a hand up back there? Nope, okay. All right. Primrose. The seed is very high in a very expensive supplement kind of oil, which I'd have to look up for you to give you the exact name. But what Jana Fishman does, Jana Fishman is Doug Elliott, who's one of our wild plant experts. She collects the seed from primrose and then dries it and then puts it in her coffee grinder every morning and grinds it up and puts it in her cereal. So after the cereal has been cooked, she adds it so she's not heating the oils and she's getting that oil. If you just ate it, of course, it wouldn't get digested. It'd come right out the other end. But if you grind it up, you get those oils, and having just ground it, those oils would still be good, So.
Sorry, which plant is it, the primrose?
Right there. We also have, which I can give a few away if people want to try it, one called Tina James Magic Evening Primrose, and it opens up in the evening like they all do. It's called Evening Primrose, but it opens up within 45 minutes, and it's like as if you were watching time-lapse photography. It'll go like and pop. And I've seen people like jump up, oh, it's alive. Of course it's alive, but it's also animated, which is what's so special about it. It's way more interesting than the average TV show. Put it by your doorstep and show your guests, And so we could probably offer a few of those out. I don't know if we can give them to everybody, but yeah. Okay, so now I'm just looking for the grape. I want you to see the wild grape. It looks a little different. And it's here. I looked at, okay, here we go. So you can see it's already in flower. And I would go for the lighter green. None of these are really as big as I'd like as far as using them for making tomatas, but a little bit bigger than that, and I just would cook up some eggplant, some rice. If I had some lamb that I was willing to eat, like our own, some lamb, make a very delicious Greek item. Somebody here can tell me much more about than I can say, right? Yeah. Do you collect the wild grape leaves for it?
We do.
Yeah. So that's a good one to also know. They're everywhere, And then of course in the fall you can pick the grapes, By the way, both the leaves and the flowers and the fruit are all excellent for making starters for sourdough. Lots of good wild yeast on them. Make a really good starter. Yeah, does anybody not know poison ivy? Good.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, go ahead, take a look. This time of year it's really easy because it's got that gorgeous yet vicious looking resinous look,
It's a little red tinge, young.
Yeah. By the way, there's also people, I've talked to people that actually do this. I have not had the courage to do it. They pick the very first youngest leaf and they eat it and they keep doing that and they're immune for the season.
They say the Indians did it.
Yeah. I just wouldn't want the thought of having that inside. Which people have gotten from it burning. People have gotten really nasty internal.
Right if it's burning.
Yeah, so it's just something to be careful about. Obviously, we didn't probably run into it. Okay, so here's a good stand of the peas. The flowers, by the way, are also edible. If anybody wants to try the flowers. And this is more, that was a pretty scrawny version. That's a good pea shoot. People want to pass that around and take a taste, This is just a little bit lusher here. Pardon?
This wouldn't be amaranth, would it?
No, that's stock. And so see if you can see if the seed, no, these are already set, so I don't think you can find them being winged. But that's how you would tell if it had the medicinals, if the seeds were kind of winged. Oh, it is chamomile.
Yeah, it's so nice.
Yep. It's probably Roman chamomile, but it's chamomile. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. I forgot about it.
Isn't that nice? I
Yeah.
love that.
You can make a tea from it, you know. It's a little stronger than the German. It's the Roman. Ah. Does everybody know mullein? Not food. Not food, but American Indians used it as a lung cure. And I learned years ago when I was trying to quit smoking, I made a mix with that in it. And it gives you like a 1 or 2 second buzz.
Oh.
It's probably not just oxygen deprivation. It actually is a buzz.
Oh,
You know.
really?
Mullein. Makes a big, tall spike.
Yeah.
You know.
I dry it and make a tea out of it
Mhm.
for cough.
Right, exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Is that a
They may-
biennial?
Yes, it's a biennial. Yeah, yeah,
It stalks every other year.
yeah. And we have a wonderful Greek version in the garden that's like pointier leaves and huge, and it makes a candelabra of those flowers, and more of the yellow flowers open at once.
Oh, cool.
So it's really lovely, and it brings more bees in too. You know. And as we walk along here, well, right there, this size right here is sought after by people who teach people how to start fires. They use this stalk for the drill for starting fires. I don't know how to start fires, so I can't tell you how to use it, but I know that I've had them come to me and say, do you have any? Of course, I always had plenty.
I heard that Native Americans would use the mullein leaves to kill fish, and then they could harvest them out of the water. Do you know anything about that?
That's new to me.
They'd wave them
That's
around
very
the water,
interesting.
and it would kind of stun and poison the fish.
Uh-huh.
But whatever poisoned them wouldn't bother us, especially if you cook the fish.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that one. Yeah.
Gives them
I love having classes like this because I always learn as I teach. You know. Anyway, that size there would be good for starting fires. This is a stalk of the mullein. It's a flower stalk. You know. Anybody that doesn't have it and wants it, there's probably still viable seed in there. You know. But yeah, it's not. There's no shortage of it when you're in the right place. There's another one called moth mullein, which is a favorite wildflower of mine. I don't know about its medicinal ones, but it's got a white flower with a red center. Really lovely. Something I neglected to show folks in the greenhouse, I have a little bit of it. Do people know Smartweed Polygamy? Okay, so yeah, like the kind of long pink flowers. So Smartweed is a polygonum, right? It's got these little kind of joints, and there's a cultivar that is known as Vietnamese cilantro. It looks just like the weed. Okay, there's also ones called lady's thumbprint. That plant's basically edible. It's also harborage for big-eyed bugs which feed on flea beetles. And it's got a cousin which is taking over Madison County along the creeks. Giant, what is it called? The weed that's in regalia that's taken over Madison County, that's in all the banks. It just went out of my head. Giant, oh, it'll come to me. It's in the same family. Giant knotweed. You know, incredibly invasive, and yet where it's in bloom, you will see the diversity of insect life that you can't believe. Just massive diversity of insect life. The young shoots of the giant knotweed, totally edible. You can eat them, and you should eat them because they're taken over everywhere. But it also has a product that's now extracted from it and put into a product called regalia that helps tomato plants and other plants to raise the level of phenols in their leaves and therefore be more resistant to really bad funguses like late blight.
What color is the stem of that smartweed?
Smartweed, it's got some reddish when it's young, yeah.
Okay.
But it's that,
I think I know it.
the opposite leaves, and there's also one that's got like a mark towards the back that's called lady's thumbprint. You know, it's a bigger one, bigger version, and it's got this like what looks as if a lady had made a thumbprint there.
Okay.
You know, so it's pretty distinctive that way. You know, but they're all edible. I don't find them any very exciting, but once again, if you needed it, you could eat it. And also, I would not let a lot of it stay in the garden because it will take over. But if you have edges where it can be okay, it's arborage for bugs that help to control flea beetles, so it's not a bad plant. That is, my guess is it's honeysuckle, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's a guess. I don't know all of them. If they aren't a problem where I grow, it's nothing I want. I know that, you know. This is all, of course, bittersweet, totally taken over. And that's what it does. Anybody gonna want to start a fire?
What's with the? I mean, is it flower, or they use that to? Oh, that's got pith in it, though,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
tender.
I think they use, you know, how they do that thing where they twirl it, you know, and it's like, you know, that.
Well, that could be too, because
Yeah.
that pith. in it.
One that I learned this year, folks, because I was supposed to bring a potluck dish to an event I didn't get to go to because things got too busy. Young beech leaves, incredible delicacy.
Young what?
Beech tree. The young leaves, quite delicious. Birch leaves, also edible, not quite as good, you know. Anybody ever walked through downtown Biltmore Village? Great big huge trees with the heart-shaped leaves, basswood, edible. Pretty high in protein. I mean, if we had basswood trees growing in all the neighborhoods, in a pinch, that could be a great resource, you know. Pardon?
I said instead of Bradford Pears.
Yeah, right. Well, and then the flowers are linden flowers, great tea, you know, really good for you. Bradford pear we should be grafting other pears onto, you know. I have wild cherries in my front yard, and I'm learning to graft cherries onto them, you know, because I can only look at so many ornamental cherries.
You could just go gorilla grafting.
Yeah, people are doing that. Yeah, they're out there. Well, I'm about to talk to the Buncombe County Food Policy Council about what to do for food security, and I'm going to be encouraging that, you know, that we should be looking at grafting some of these pears, you know. And in general, like every neighborhood, it's a lovely shade tree. Why not have at least one basswood? Do people know nutsedge? Okay, well, when we get back to the garden, I'll show you it. They say it tastes of macadamia, and this is the time of year to eat them, because if you harvest them in the fall, they'll break your teeth. But it's a sedge that leaves a nut, and it's a really bad weed in the garden. But there's quite a few nuts sometimes off of a bigger plant, and they do taste like, you know, like macadamia nuts. Once again, it's kind of like the Smilax and a few other things we looked at. It'd take a lot to make a significant meal, you know. And probably we will have to be in the situation that the Cambodian people found them in before we're really going to get serious about that as a food, you know. Yeah, that's, I think they call it, it's in the aster family, but I think it's called fleabane or something like that. Yeah. Not an edible that I know of, but a good beneficial insect plant. Yeah. But yeah, you can tell the sedge by this wet area. That's where you're going to find the sedges, you know. This wet area. So this is also a place where you could establish things that like water. You know, things like water celery, and you'd be okay with putting it here because water celery, maybe it could become invasive. It's not very hardy, but I would never want to put it by the waterways. But here, this stays wet enough that it might very well do. You know, and maybe watercress. Watercress doesn't need running water as long as it stays wet. It'll work good. So there's some options to try in these areas, and we will play with the wet areas. We're not going to drain them. We'll just see what works in them, you know. Years ago, I helped Virginia Tech to develop their beneficial insect program, and I ran into a little bit of resistance because what I wrote talked about leaving the wild in place, never getting rid of all the wild. And the person who was compiling it all said, Pat, I can't tell farmers to grow weeds. But you do want to grow weeds. You want to have weeds both for that diversity of food for yourself and for that diversity of life that might have the next solution. It might be where the insects that are going to help to control your problem have harborage. You know, so leaving and it doesn't have to be in your farm, or garden or in your farm, the ditches, the edges, you know. But some wild places are important as far as guaranteeing you that diversity. And so this kind of wet, wild place, you know, I look at, well, what can I do in there? It's kind of useless. I don't know what it's good for, but I might learn next year. You never know when I'm going to be taught by the place. So just observe and let it be if you can. You know, you pick the places that you need to control, but then there are places that it's best not to control and just let them teach you. And so, especially like if you don't have a lot of moist places, that might be a good thing to leave, you know. A good area that is good to have that's wet, that's just going to bring in different life. Cattails, for example. All kinds of ways to eat cattails. You can make hats out of the leaves, tons of uses, you know. On the other hand, it can also be a great habitat for mosquitoes. But then mosquitoes feed all kinds of other things. So it's all about creating the balances. And if you have too many mosquitoes, you need more bats and you need more swallows. You know, you need the solutions to that rather than thinking, oh, let's wipe that stuff out. How do we ramp up? And in fact, a favorite experience of mine was visiting a girlfriend who lived on the edge of New Orleans, across the bridge, headed downriver, and she lived right along the Mississippi River, you know, south of New Orleans, on an edge so far out of the city, yet still in the city, that they had fire hydrants, but they stole the water from it because there was no water service. So even our neighbor was a cop, was hooked up to the hydrant. And once in a while the city would come along, would steal your hookups, but they didn't really make you not collect the water. And so out there, when she first moved in, mosquitoes weren't that bad, and there were just millions and millions of dragonflies everywhere. And then they started spraying. And not so many dragonflies, loads and loads of mosquitoes, you know. So these wild places, you know, it's about moving towards more diversity and getting less, you know, even the invasives. I don't want people to encourage invasives, but I encourage using the invasives you have and not deciding that because they're invasives, you can't take advantage of them, you know. And, you know, if you don't want invasives to take over, then if you disturb a place, you help to put plants like elderberries in there that can do the initial dominance. I mean, according to Stephen Harrod Booner, elderberries are called elders because they were the elders of the plant community. You know, and I would suspect that what that was a likelihood that they have particularly fertile and good for all kinds of plants, plant exudates. So they make a place more inviting to other plants. You know, and so if you've got a place you disturb, elderberries would be a great one to move in. Other kinds of wild plants that do easily well that you want to eat, and let them take over instead of things like bittersweet, you know, things that are invasive that we don't have immediate uses for. So, okay, let's head back. Okay, thank you. All right. Good, glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad that we did it.